Hello and welcome to Street Psychology Podcast. Today's guest is CF Mickey. She's going to be talking about her new book, Cultivating Freedom, and promoting narcissism awareness. So, Katie, want to start just by introducing yourself and more about your book?
I am a grandmother. I'm a mother of three, grandmother of six, and I left a 33-year narcissistic marriage. We built up a farm business and we both actually worked off the farm too. My book, Cultivating Freedom, is learning about my husband's mental illness and diving deeper to find out how I got where I got and why I allowed what I did in my marriage.
Okay, so diving deeper into that,
Yes.
because you said that this was a marriage. This wasn't a short term marriage, this was a long term marriage. And you didn't really know what was going on with your husband.
When I was first married, we got the honeymoon phase and everything. Actually, the one red flag that I really missed that I called him out on too was on our first date. He picked me up to take me to the restaurant and he walked in front of me. Like I'm in high heels and I'm running, trying to keep up beside him. He walked into the restaurant ahead of me, didn't hold the door open, and that really bothered me. But yeah, we sat down for supper and had a really good supper. So I'm upset because when you look back on it and you learn more from the actions, he was demonstrating dominance and hierarchy. He was ahead, I follow. He comes first, I come after. And that was probably my first real sign. And then another major red flag showed up after we were married. I had to go out to the field to pick him up. And I had a young daughter from a previous relationship. And he always criticized my driving. So I thought he's standing a little ways away from the tractor. I'll pull in between him and the tractor and he can hop in the driver's side and I'll take off. Then all of a sudden, I come into the field, I start entering the field, and he's running for the tractor. Then he gets in the truck and he starts hollering at me that I tried running him over. We weren't even married a year and he thinks I'm trying to do him in. So it's just at that point, all of a sudden my laughing stopped and it was, dang, there is something wrong with this man.
Oh, and that's early on in the relationship. So you're seeing these signs. You know that it's not normal per se for what you'd experienced previously. So what were you thinking was wrong at that time?
Honestly, I didn't know. His mom phoned me around Christmas time and asked me how he was doing. And I said, not very well, because I'm trying to figure out if there's been all these life changes and his dad's not around, if he's missing his dad or what's going on. And she said, no, she said he always struggles this time of year. And I noticed that from about the middle of November till January, he had a hard time. I struggled for years trying to put it together and trying to figure it out. And it wasn't until our 28th year of marriage when he actually admitted to depression. And I said, I know you're depressed. I said, but I can't help you. I said, you're the only one that can do something about it. So that's
Mm.
when we started seeing the medical field. And then he was on medication and then went off the medication. The first time when we were in there, he had to fill out a questionnaire and he had me with him in the doctor's office. And he says, what do I tell them? And I said, just be honest. That's why we're here. And so then the doctor put him on medication and we had to come back in 6 weeks for reassessment. The first thing the doctor said was, I couldn't let you leave without medicating you last time. I'm just about breaking out in tears because I'm thinking 28 years of this and we're finally getting help. But the medication only treats part of it. it doesn't treat his personality disorder.
That's the big thing here is that you guys realize that he's depressed, which is one thing. So my thing is, he didn't give you any pushback about the doctor or the medication.
Oh, yeah. 'Cause I
Okay.
know how it's all going to play out. Okay. It'll be my fault in the end. So he said, book me an appointment. So I booked him an appointment. We're in the doctor's office. They call his name. And I just sat there. And he stood up and he said, why aren't you coming with me? And I said, only if you want me to. I want you to. Okay. So now we're in the doctor's office. And the doctor looks at me. He says, Katie, don't be answering any of his questions. And I said, no, I won't. He answered the questions. And as he's filling them out, he looked at me and he said, this isn't looking good. And I said, I don't care. We're here to get solutions and answers. And then the doctor came in and looked at me and he said, have you ever felt threatened for your life? And I said, no. And that's not the truth, but my husband's sitting there. I didn't want to be honest. I didn't want to put him down. So the doctor put him on medication, and then the depression medication affects your libido, and that's where he wasn't happy with. And so when we went back for reassessment and stuff, it was a few visits. He wanted change, and I didn't want him to go off the medication. And I voiced my opinion in the doctor's office. I said, I couldn't talk to you before. And then he twisted it around. And I guess maybe he is right. I still wanted him to be medicated, but there was a reason for it. So, yeah, so that ended the medication and that ended that.
How long did that medication last?
Once we were going through that process, probably about 6 months. And the doctor warned him, once you get feeling better, do not go off of it. He went off of it. And we were right back to square one.
So, with the medication, you did see some improvements in being able to talk to him more. It sounds like he was more calm.
Yeah, you could actually have a conversation with him, whereas before I couldn't. And I'm back to having not much of a conversation with him at all. And I just found with this personality disorder, each year I could feel him slipping deeper and deeper into it. If I'd tell him a hardship, what was happening with my family or what they were going through, I would catch him smirking and smiling. And it got to a point where I couldn't tell him anything. He wasn't the man that I thought I married.
That's an important part of the narcissistic personality disorder, not understanding how they can be so different than what you originally thought.
You know, before we hit the doctor over the depression meds, I'm not happy with my marriage. It's getting worse. I'm living in my own bedroom for 2 years, because my body's changing. I have to be able to sleep at night. I can't have the TV on all night in the bedroom. And finally, after about 2 years, he said, will you come back? And I said, only if the TV stays off. And he said, it will. Then I moved back into our bedroom. And one night he came to bed and I said, did you put the timer on the TV? I said, I have to be up at 5 a.m. And he said to me, go sleep in the other bedroom. And that's when I thought, I am never going back. So at that point, I was back in my own bedroom for another 2 years before I actually left. This whole process was long, and figuring out the MPD, I wasn't happy with the marriage, and I was going to counselors, trying to put it together, trying to figure out what was going on, if there was medication or what we could do, but he would never ever come with me to the counselor. Why would I go? I don't have a problem. I said, we've got a terrible marriage. Physical abuse was increasing. And she said to me, what would happen if your daughters were in a relationship like that? What would you tell them? And I said, to leave. And she said, then why aren't you? And I said, I want to give my son an opportunity to farm. And I know his dad won't do that. And so she said, "You would sacrifice yourself for your son." And I said, "Yes, I would." And at that time, I didn't understand the whole comprehension of sacrifice. Now I know how he has affected me, but at the time, I didn't understand all that it entailed. But even now, when I look back on it, I don't think I would change anything that I did, because as a mom, that's my job, to protect and help your children out. I'm stubborn and bullheaded. I don't think, even if I did comprehend everything and all the damage, I still would have changed it. I still would have done that for my child.
So remove the compassion and the goals for you and your child, your son, you would have left a lot sooner.
In our 28th year marriage, that's when, and he stopped going to the doctor. But I was still going to the doctor and checking in and going to the counselor, trying to put the pieces together. And I'd report back, this is what's going on, this and this. And finally, the doctor looked at me and he said, without a proper assessment, he said, right now he's NPD. And I didn't know what that meant. I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting to go in for my appointment, and I Googled it on the phone. And all of a sudden it came up, and it wasn't just one or two or three traits, it was 10 traits. And I just broke out bawling because I finally got a name for it. Now I got to educate myself on what it all entails and what I'm faced with. And towards the end of our marriage, when I was staying in my own bedroom, one of the daughters were at the farm, and I said, "Just wait, I got to grab something from the bedroom." And she followed me into my bedroom and she said, "If you don't get out now, you're going to be in a home before you know it." And I said to her, "I cannot leave your dad until I've exhausted all avenues to help him, because I don't want to have any regrets or any second thoughts." So I stayed for another 5 years. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And the physical abuse was increasing. The last time when he grabbed me by the throat and pinned me, I thought to myself, this isn't going to end well. I got to get out.
So the physical abuse, did that start early on in the relationship?
No, no, it didn't. It progressed into that. Yeah. Maybe part of the progression was I was tired of living that way. I was tired of always being in the defensive mode, explaining all my actions, being put down. Like we would be out, or would even have the kids at the farm for supper, and we'd all be sitting at the table. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he said, "You should go bath with the dog in the trough outside." And my son just kind of looked at him and said, "What? What did you just say?" And then I just piped up and said, "Oh, your dad's being a jerk." And then after I'm thinking about it, why do I always cover for him? Oh, like continually. I was tired of being put down. I was tired of just being trash.
And trying to change his opinion about that.
Well, I can, and that's another thing. I'm here on the farm. I work off the farm part time. I've always had my own income. And then it's okay, we've got the farming business. Now we got to work together. I'm driving the combine, he's driving the trucks. And then as time progressed and we're increasing in the land base and the kids are gone, he's got his own combine. I got my own combine. We got our own trucks. And my role on the farm had increased significantly, that I had to quit my job. I'm out fueling the combine, cleaning the windows, helping them with maintenance, packing the lunches, and then we'll be out in the field. And the one day he said to me around 7 o'clock, and he said, "What's for supper?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I've been working with you all day." At the time, our daughter was home from college. So he phoned her And she phones me up and she says, Mom, what do you want for supper? And I said, 2 cold wieners and a can of Diet Pepsi. And she says, Oh, you're the easiest. But like I noticed my job increasing on the farm and his decreasing. And even my girls pointed it out. They pulled me aside and they said, Mom.
Okay. I was wondering about that when your kids started to notice what was going on.
It's funny because once I left, we had cousins that always used to visit us and then quit coming. And she said, I can remember being at your place for supper and something really funny was said. And the kids all looked at their dad to see if it was okay to laugh. That's when I knew something wasn't right. It is just something we've all lived with. You can feel the aura. And when you walk into a room and you can feel that, everybody kind of disperses.
Wow. I've heard it put that way. You can feel and recognize a narcissist when they walk in the room.
Oh, yeah. You know,
But isn't it weird how, without having a name to it or an experience, we might not always really understand what that means?
oh, totally. And the term is just thrown around so loosely without understanding the significance of what you're actually saying. It's amazing once you're out of it. And it's like the layers of an onion where you're peeling it back, figuring out why you feel the way you do. For example, I went to the city with my daughter and she got out of the vehicle and stood at the front of the vehicle waiting for me to walk into the store with her. All of a sudden, it just hit me and I just break out crying. And then I thought, why am I feeling this way? 33 years, I didn't have anybody that wanted to walk in beside me. It's the little things that build up. And then all of a sudden, 33 years later, it's just this man has so much control. So then I move it there and then I move it there. And it was terrible.
Yeah, it's never enough.
No.
Nothing's ever quite right. You can't do anything right.
Yeah.
And you try. And like you said, it's a slow build before this realization happens.
And you get overthinking as a trauma response because it was never enough. And you're always, okay, now what? Now what's he going to say? What can I do to prevent that? Or I married the man that I thought was going to love me and look after me. And that was another hard pill to understand was the counselor had said to me, it sounds like you're a possession, not a wife. And when I think back on it, how many times did I say to him, I'm not your child, I'm your wife? Everything's contractual. Okay, they married me, he married me, so now he owns me. Now I have to serve him and do what he wants. And there were any, what would you like to do today? Or there was nothing like that.
Ever.
No, no. I was serving him and never an apology.
Yeah. And so in the beginning of the relationship, before the marriage happened, because you were telling me you were noticing the things like he's not holding the door open for you, he's not responding the way you would think he would about family details that
Okay, I worked full time evenings and he was going to school during the day. So we had a few hours in the evening and then he moved back in to the city when he was going back to university. And then his mom lived, but lived with us for the winter. So it wasn't late. He treated his mom very well. He would take her to her appointments, very close with his mom. And I'm thinking, like, he's a good man. Look what he's doing for his mom. He's going to care for me and look after me.
yeah.
But that attracted me to him when I saw how he cared for his mom. Him and his friend built his mom a house. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big one because that's one of the things we hear. Watch and see how they treat their mom.
Yeah. But then once you're in the relationship and you're married, I saw certain behaviors that his mom had that he had.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when you talk about triangulation on pitting the other, his mom was very good at that. And
Mhm.
it didn't take me long to figure out that she's got 4 kids, and it's like everybody gets a turn at being the special one. And I learned early on, and I never did get upset. It never bothered me because I knew her games. But his mom was very much, I caught her in several lies. And then he's coming and confronting me. And I said, if that's what you believe, I said, you're living in the wrong house.
Lying about you.
Yeah. Like she stopped in once on her trip home from BC to give Brent a salmon. So I'm at the kitchen table with the kids and we're just having craft dinner. I said, you're welcome to come in and have some dinner with us if you want. I said, we're just having craft dinner. And she said, oh, no, I want to get home. So okay, thanks. I'll tell Brent that you left the salmon for him. And I put it in the fridge. And then a couple days later, he comes up to me and he said, why wouldn't you invite mom into the house? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, she said you wouldn't even invite her in. Why would you even lie about something little like that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's intentional.
Oh, very intentional. And we were building the house, and I had to I'm pregnant, and my older one's in dancing. So once a week, we would go in and buy groceries, take her to her dancing, and then we'd come home. So she phoned up and she said, do you want me to come out and look after the baby? You're taking the other one to dancing. And I said, oh, I'd love that. That'd be perfect. And so when she got to the farm, I had pasta and sauce and hamburger on the counter. I said, this is what we were going to have for supper. And then I left. And then I came back at 7 o'clock, and Brent was cooking supper, and our child was crying and screaming. And I said, what's going on? It was 7 o'clock at night. And he said, Mom didn't even cook supper or feed us. And after that, that crossed a major line with me. I really shut down in taking the kids to see her. I just, no.
Yeah. You it's a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I'm going to deal with that.
And that would cause things like that when they happen, it causes a further drift in the marriage.
Exactly. Like he said to me, he said, Mom's complaining that you never take the kids there anymore. And I said, why aren't you taking the kids there? Like that was my
Yeah.
choice. I did put a boundary up. Like, you did me wrong. You did my kids wrong.
Yeah. And boundaries. I just want to point out how important boundaries are when dealing with a narcissist in any capacity. And in that sense, you put a boundary up, but it was more difficult to set up those boundaries within your marriage.
Oh, yeah. And that's why when I wrote this book, I went back to my childhood because I believe a lot of my boundaries were knocked away in my childhood with my stepdad. And so when it comes to my marriage, my boundaries weren't as high as they should have been. I was too forgiving and I was too pleasing and I wanted everything to work.
Which is also a good point when we're asking, how did I get into this type of relationship? Why me?
Yeah.
So too forgiving,
Yeah.
selfless.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking you would regret that because that is you, but I'm thinking you also now understand how that placed you in that situation.
Oh, I went back to my childhood and I started connecting the dots, and I'm writing the memoir. It all made sense because my biggest worry is how do I prevent this from happening again? Like my self confidence was stripped right down. And it's like, how do I ever have any confidence in any decision that I make? And I have talked to the counselor about that. And she said, you're learning how to trust your gut instincts and the signs.
Yeah. So have you noticed being able to follow your gut more in potential situations like this since
Oh
then?
yeah. I tend to put up a lot of walls around myself. There, I think about 3 years after I left, a friend came up just to give me a hug and, how are you doing? And I just cringed and I pulled away. And he said, did I do something wrong? And I said, no, you didn't. But I still cannot let anybody touch me. And I think that's part of the whole betrayal, too.
And speak more about that.
I do know he was stepping out of the marriage.
Okay.
There was too many signs and confronted him, and oh, he would laugh it off or he'd make this excuse or that excuse, but no, the signs were there. I know it was happening, and like I went to bed many nights crying because I knew, but yet I had to be quiet because I wanted to learn more about what was happening before I confronted him.
So you wanted to have enough information
Yeah.
when you confronted him.
Yes.
Do you feel like you had enough
Oh,
information?
I did confront him several times, and he just denied
Yeah.
it. It was going
Yeah.
nowhere. And to me, that's the ultimate betrayal. Towards the end, we were talking about splitting, divorcing, and he would say to me, I'll just rent your land from you. And I said, no, you won't. We're done. I'm taking my share of the land. And then I turned it around on how he treated his son. And I said to him, and you'll be paying me for rental of a heated house, and you'll be paying me rental on a fully tooled heated shop, and you'll be paying me rental for bin space for using my equipment. I just started piling everything up that he was treating our son like, and he sat there and he never said nothing. And then later on down the road, you'd hear, why would you hire a lawyer unless you want more than you deserve? Or just,
Still trying to have control of
what do
sort.
you do with that, eh?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
crap
No, and you shouldn't. No one would
up.
should want to when you talk about it, right? It sounds ridiculous. You wouldn't understand how you're supposed to make sense of it, but we do.
We do. And towards the, I got really good at gray rocking. So when he would bait me or gaslight me, I'd just look at him, not say a word, and walk away.
Yeah, and that's another technique to use just for listeners who might be wondering, how do I decrease the likelihood of this happening? Is to walk away, don't entertain it, don't get too emotionally involved, protect your peace.
Yeah.
So did that work?
Oh, hugely. Actually, he came, it was April, and I had asked him if he's going to pull the drill out to go through it to get ready for seeding. And oh, I've got lots of time for that. I'm not saying anymore because, and then all of a sudden, seeding time comes, the drill gets pulled out, and you realize he bent the frame on the drill. I'm rushing off to the city to get new parts and to get iron. And then I bring the parts back, and he comes in for dinner, and we've got pasta for dinner. He starts whining and complaining on how far behind he is in the work. Then I said,
I told you.
I said, I'm not surprised. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, that plate swung up against the wall. And here, bitch, clean this up. And I just calmly looked at him and no. I said, I think I'm going to leave it there so everybody knows who I live with. and I walked out the front door, grabbed my pup, and behind the house, just waiting for him to leave. And then I came around the side of the house and he was hollering at me. I cleaned up your mess. And then he had his glass of juice and started hollering at me again and threw it down on the driveway. And the glass actually bounced up and put a dent in his truck. I just stood there and looked.
So that's what it does.
That was in 2013 that happened.
That's an example where he still blew up.
Yeah.
You were not really involved in the discussion anymore after that.
No.
Yeah.
It just no response is the best. And I have to say, over time, with the actions and the abuse, like you lose all respect. You know, the man that you loved, like he's just killed it all. Killed it.
The man that you loved. And this is not an easy thing to get over. It does take time to process what's happened to you and to allow those feelings to dissipate.
Yeah.
But when they do, there's no turning back.
Well, and that was the biggest thing when I left, because when I come to a decision like that, there's no back and forth when I leave. And yes, he was crying on the phone. And I said, it's done. Like, I've lost all respect. And that his friend phoned me up and asked for me to come to the farm to talk to both of them. And I did. And he said to me, Brent says that he plays a lot of mind games. And I said, yes, he does. Like, even down at the barn when the kids were so little and looking after the grinder for the chop, he had to run back to the shop for parts. And my job was watching the grinder and make sure that it kept running. And he was taking a while. I had the two little kids, they weren't in school yet. And the feed was going into another pen and stuff. So I had no choice but to shut it off. And when he got back, I told him I had no choice. And he just lost it on me. And I'm standing there holding the two little kids. I'm holding them by the hand. And like, I was so scared that I was frozen. And that night he said to me, why didn't you leave when I was hollering at you like that? Why did you let me holler in front of those kids? And I said, I couldn't move my feet even if I wanted to. I said, that's when I learned what frozen stiff meant. He knows what he's doing.
Because I'm thinking at an earlier point, that was a question for you, how much he was aware of what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the time there's been so much, and you're always putting the pieces together. And when you're on the internet or Googling, trying to figure out, okay, what's going on, it's really honestly rewarding when you've got the medical field telling you, because then that gives you a basis where you can go and learn more and figure out what type and put it together. I actually had a message from one of my friends, and she said, I feel I owe you an apology. There were things that resonated with me in your book. And she said, I wish I would have helped you more. And she said, but we're all taught to mind our own business. And I said, there's nothing that anybody could have done. It was my journey, and I had to figure it out. I wanted my marriage to work, and I had to figure it out so that it would work. But all that was not the plan. And after I left, I was in the grocery store, and I had another person come up to me and said, he's always been different. And I said, I'm okay with different. I'm not okay with abuse.
So when you decided to leave, because these experiences were after that, where they said, oh, I'm sorry, I should have noticed.
Yeah.
So during the relationship, you didn't talk to anybody
I
about
never talked to
going.
anybody. I never talked to anybody. I never talked to my family. I never talked to Nobody, because if my marriage worked, I didn't want any hard feelings with anybody. So I kept it in.
Yep. That's tough, right?
Yeah.
You went through that alone.
I know my mom knew something was going on because that one year, a Christmas party in town, and she came down for it. Brent and I and my mom all went in for supper and sat and watched the music. And then Brent came home earlier, mom and I did. And the next morning, we're all at the kitchen table having a visit. And he gets up and he leaves and comes back with his bag packed and said, I'm going on a holiday. Oh, where are you going? BC. Okay, have a good holiday. And he left. My mom's sitting there and she's not saying nothing and she never interfered. And I know she's, oh, this isn't normal.
But you saw
Oh, yeah.
her expression that indicated something's wrong.
Yeah. And after mom and I went to pick up my brother's dog and brought him back to the house. And the dog's old and he got anxiety. And so he slept in the bedroom with my mom. And in the morning, mom got up to let the dog out and she's in her pajamas. This is November. And Brent locked her out of the house. Said, you're
What?
not coming in because dogs aren't allowed in the house. So she had to put the dog in the car before he unlocked the house. That caused problems with him and I.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when it's his friend, their dog can be in the house all weekend.
No way.
And then, yeah. What do you do?
Mind blown.
Yeah.
How would one
You can't justify that.
how did he justify that?
He does not have the ability to self reflect. So and it's like, it's the hierarchy. What he says goes and everybody listens.
Yeah, because that was already established.
Oh,
It was
yeah, our
well and
first date.
established.
I didn't catch that one.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh, So, what about your mom after this is over and you finally leave? What's her reaction?
She is very reserved in her comments. If I need help, she'll help me out. But like she said, that was one thing her mom and dad did is they never judged her for making the decisions that she did. They would just say, "Okay, what's your plan going forward?"
Mm.
Mom was very good that way. She never came back. She never badmouthed him or never said, oh, I noticed this or he doesn't do that. You never ever heard nothing like that from
And how important was that for you?
her. Honestly, I rely on my mom a lot. When I first left, I had a couple of friends and my mom and my brother. And because a lot of times when you leave, you're replaying and re-saying everything, trying to make sense of it all. And the more you say it, the more you get it, you stand it. And not one of them ever said, okay, that's enough. I'm tired of listening to you. They gave me their time. And I needed that to process and to actually understand what was going on.
Yeah, saying it out loud,
Yeah. Yeah.
it helps.
And that's why I started journaling. And the journaling just went from one thing into another. And I ended up joining a writing group. And the people in the writing group are saying, do you know how many people are in your same boat? This would definitely help. In the book, I wrote my whole journey going through the courts, questions to ask lawyers and therapists to figure out which is the good one, checklist. If you're in this boat, these are the things that you should get your ducks in order before you leave. And signs to watch for, and then signs for healing, that you're getting healed. What are some of your signs?
Yeah, what are some of your signs? Because,
Yeah.
yeah, so, and I know there's a lot in your book. So I'm thinking through it because you've written this down. All of it is out there for everyone to see, to use. and to gain awareness about this condition. Because, like we talked about earlier, it's been thrown around a lot lately. You're a narcissist. This person is a narcissist. That person, maybe they have some traits. I want to acknowledge traits do exist in some people, but there is a distinct difference between that and the personality disorder.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with certain traits on a continual basis with people, that's the variable empathy, the grandiosity, the need for admiration, envy of others, egocentrical, socially challenged. Like, you've got to have quite a few of those traits to actually know, okay, then that person is probably a narcissist. But just because they're selfish or they want to be first in line or something, that's not, no, not
Yeah.
narcissism.
You don't want to just call that person a narcissist. Those are personality traits.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's always good to point out that difference so people can do more research and figure out whether or not they're dealing with a narcissist at any capacity. It could be a relationship, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a boss.
Yeah.
It exists in all facets of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't know that they're victims. You didn't know you were a victim for 28 years.
And even after I left my 33-year marriage, and for 2 years after that, in the whole system, I put him first. Let him pick out his equipment, and I'm not going to fight with him over that. Finally, after about 2 years, I thought, I got to start looking after myself because I'm divorcing the man that wants to just ruin me. Honestly, I put everything that I could. The day that I left, what I was taking with me, I had my suitcases in my own bedroom. I had sewing machine stuff like that. And when he came in and he's sitting in the living room eating his dinner, I threw everything in the back seat of the truck. And I went into the living room and said, "You want me gone? I'm gone. But I'm not going to be responsible for what you do on this farm." And I left, got in my truck, and I drove away. 33 years, a farm business. And I honestly didn't know how it was all going to play out. I really didn't. I just knew mentally I had to get out if I needed to survive. I had to get out because I was surviving day to day.
Yeah. And did you keep in contact with him?
Only through email and text. When it went to court, I had to do all the farm books and he had to do the manual labor. And the first time we were in court, it was just the two lawyers and the judge. And I was in there observing. And my lawyer looked back at me and then looked at the judge so that the judge knew I was in court. And towards the end of the deliberation or meeting or whatever you want to call it, the judge looked directly at me and then at my lawyer and said, "I highly recommend your client get camera surveillance on the farm." So we left, and my lawyer took me into a sealed room and he said, "I've never had a judge say that before."
Really?
So I believe I used a lot of 8 by 10 pictures to try and explain my point of view and show that he wasn't being truthful.
Yeah. And you were validated.
Totally. Towards the end, when we're going through discovery, and after the one session of binding trial, his lawyer reaches across the table to shake my hand. "Nice to see you again." And I took that as a win because I've been in that room with that man twice before, and he's never ever made that gesture. The pretrial briefs were probably 6, 7 times as thick as what his were. I documented everything.
Everything. Document as much as possible. So you don't, for one, question your own experiences.
And one thing you gotta, and it's your whole mindset. It can't be, "Oh, poor me," or "He's doing this." It's just giving you a gift. This is what he's doing. Record it.
Yeah.
You've lived with the man for 33 years. You know how he thinks.
Yeah.
And so you know exactly what he's going to do when he's going to do it. And on the other aspect, he does not know anything about me because he's
Right.
never wanted to.
Didn't care.
No, I
Didn't
was
think
there
he
to
needed
serve
to.
him.
Yes.
Look at the gifts that he's giving you.
Because more power than you think.
Yeah. That whole mindset is so important. A lot of people that stay in a loveless marriage and for the fear of what's on the other side. But if you don't take the plunge and if you don't leave, you're never, ever going to have the opportunity for anything better. You will never open new doors unless you close the old ones.
Where can we find your book?
Cultivatingfreedom.ca.
Got it.
And that takes you to my website. And when you subscribe, you'll get all the latest podcasts and the information on what I've been doing and what I've been up to and what I've been writing about.
Any final words for listeners?
Have faith in yourself and don't play victim and do the best to your ability. Be grateful for the gifts that they give you because in the end, it'll be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.